Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on a short story of interest, and it is also Black History Month, so I wanted to talk about a Black writer that has stood out to me as well. And today's short story is all about the green card process and one immigrant's experience, or a group of immigrants' experience in the United States. I am referring to Green by Sefi Atta, which was published sometime around 2004. For those who don't know, Sefi Atta is a Nigerian-American writer who has been getting their work published since around 2004. They write short stories as well as books, and they've also written a couple of plays. They seem to have a play company in Lagos, which is the capital of Nigeria, and they also donate to some charities there as well. And they've won a number of awards for their work, which is also pretty cool. So just something worth noting is I did include this writer in Black History Month, but I don't think Sefi Atta would categorize themselves or call themselves Black necessarily, because Black is a term used in the diaspora in order to denote people who don't really know where their heritage comes from, and Sefi Atta knows where their heritage comes from because they call themselves Nigerian, and so there is a difference there. I just wanted to incorporate actual African writers into Black History Month because just focusing on, Black Americans doesn't feel enough to me. But I feel like there's different ways that could go, and people have different arguments to be made. And I'm probably not explaining it in the best way, and so I encourage you to read up and learn more about the diaspora and what other groups would call themselves as well. It's particularly interesting, that whole conversation. But without further ado, let's talk about Green. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Green focuses on an unnamed young girl narrator who is at the immigration office in, I think, New Orleans with her family. With her Nigerian parents who are immigrants. This young girl narrator is an American. She was born in America, and so she doesn't have the same immigration concerns that her parents do. The young girl, because of that, she's bored, and she's more focused on soccer than anything else. She's wondering if her family's going to make it back home in time in order to attend her soccer game. And her parents are pretty quick about it. They managed to renew their green card, and they don't have to worry about things like that anymore. And especially since one problem is that the father's parent died, and they weren't able to get back to Nigeria in time because they were worried about being able to return to America. And so there's been some struggle in that regard. And then it's also Mardi Gras at this time in New Orleans. There's an option for them to kind of stay and hang around and check that out. But the young girl is very eager to get back to Mississippi where they live so they can go to the soccer game. But before they go, they have some king cake. And it tastes really good to the young girl, and she even finds a baby Jesus figurine in the cake. She's pretty happy about it, although the mom worries, like, oh no, what if you would have choked on it, which is a little bit funny there. And then they drive back to Mississippi. The mother, the young girl kind of reflects on what's going on at this current point in her life. And then the mother starts naming lakes that they see, which are named after native tribes that were native to the area. And the mother just notes, oh, why don't you see natives anymore? That's strange. And then they eventually make it back to Mississippi. The young girl tells the parents about the soccer game. They go, and the young girl, as the story comes to a close, the young girl seems to be doing well in the soccer game, and she's happy, and that's where it ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with this story. As you might have guessed, the story, which is called Green, one of the themes of the story is the color green itself. It comes up a lot. It's pretty frequent. Green seems to be a huge part of the narrator's life at that moment. You see it when they talk about like stoplights, focusing on their mother, like going through green lights, but also sometimes running red lights. Mardi Gras beads, like the specific color, the sprinkles on the king cake, and the opponent team's color when they're playing soccer. Green seems to be a huge focus, although they're not big fans of that color. But it should also be noted that there's ties to their immigration status. Of course, you have the focus on green cards, which indicate your ability to stay in the country. But also there's green on the Nigerian flag, which the young girl notes, which has maybe it's the connection, like what she's thinking about, the connection to her heritage, her roots, and also the present with the green card and them trying to be Americans at this point, which the young girl is an American because she was born there. So the green card isn't really a factor in her life, but it's clearly influencing a lot of things because her family has to focus on that. So I like how Atta kind of brings in the color green and uses it to highlight just various events, but also the impact of immigration in her life. The narrator's complicated feelings kind of relate to their struggle with the immigration process. Not so much their struggle, but their parents' struggle. Just noting that whether or not their parents get that green card kind of affects their life, because if their parents have to leave, they might also have to leave. So maybe a little worry, a little bit of anxiety going on there too. Atta is also, of course, talking about the immigrant experience. Atta highlights the narrator's family's experiences in America. You see them having like thoughts on the presidency, like the father noting that he might be a good man, but the mother noting that he's not really competent at his job. And it should be noted that this was written in 2004 at a time when George W. Bush was president, and he was, pretty stupid and not a very good president overall, committing a lot of war crimes, as a lot of American presidents tend to do. But it should also be noted that Bush had a lot of policies that were negative towards immigration, making it difficult to immigrate to America, although not as difficult as Donald Trump would later make it. But it's interesting that her family is somewhat for George Bush. Maybe it's because you have to assimilate in some way, and so that's the best way to avoid spotlight on you. But at the same time, I think a lot of Bush's policies would be making it harder for them to immigrate fully and become American citizens. And then you see their observations about Mardi Gras and other cultural events in the story too. But there's some anxiety relating to the immigrant experience. As I mentioned, the green card office, whether or not they're going to be able to get the green card, maybe visit family back home and all that stuff. And then also some racism in America, how the mother notes that when she goes to the mall, they ask for her ID, indicating that there's some racism and discrimination going on in Mississippi, which isn't a surprise in the American South. Things are already difficult for people of color, but now you add the fact that you're an immigrant and things get a little bit more challenging. And then I should note that it's difficult for the parents, and it's easy to see there, but it's less interesting for the narrator, like the immigrant experience and whatnot. And again, that's because of their birth. They were born in America. They don't have to worry about their immigration status being revoked, although they do have to worry about their family possibly being deported, which is somewhat on their mind, but maybe not as much as if they themselves were full immigrant. So a lot to consider there, and I like how Atta kind of brings it all together. I do just have one issue. I enjoyed this story, but the Atta could have done more to elaborate on the ideas presented here, made it a little bit longer, possibly developed it into a full book. But I think that there's a lot of interesting ideas and themes kind of presented here that aren't fully elaborated on, and some of the characterization leaves a little bit to be desired. And I get that this is just meant to be like a short story, but again, elaborating on it a little bit more could have really fleshed it out and made it much more of a solid short story, an even greater short story than it already is. So that's just something I wanted more of here. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Green by Sefi Atta. A pretty fun, pretty good short story, one that I think is worth checking out. A great addition to Black History Month, of course, provided Sefi Atta would consider themselves to be Black, but that's another question entirely, as I mentioned before. If you have any thoughts on this, or you have simply something you want to say about my review, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, or subscribe if you want to. If you want other people to find out about Sefi or about this short story if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and strange travels at the green card office. Farewell.